this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. How's everybody doing? Good? Everything is good here. Yes. Ready to go into Halloween. What can I say? I'm being dragged to it like kicking and screaming because everywhere you go, now everything is Halloween. So pretty soon I'll put out my decorations and all of that. I'm not gonna, as a kid I used to enjoy Halloween. And even plus my birthday's in October, so there's an ulterior motive for October being a good month for me. Yep. And again, I'm going to say it. I am going to do the Halloween show, and that will happen. I'm probably going to bring on my wingman, Henry, like other times, so he can tell all his unusual stories about living up in New York, New Jersey area. Believe me, he's got plenty of them. Sometimes I have to remind him because he'll tell me and then he'll forget, but he's probably going to be the one to do it with me. And they also, I believe it or not, I got a couple of emails because last year was the first time that I did Christmas ghost stories. Because originally that was the idea, people would do the around the fireplace kind of deal, let's say a ghost story instead of, let's say, the campfire out in the campground. And traditionally, a lot of people, that's when you would say these ghost stories. So I'm going to do it again this year. I'm already preparing this in my mind. So yeah, I've got that going on. Again, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter on Substack. Go to mppellicer.com. There's a link there. Miami Ghost Chronicles, there's a link there. And I send out a newsletter maybe twice a week, if that much. And it's just news articles, old podcasts, old videos, or new ones. It's not all videos. Sometimes I have podcasts because I know a lot of people, it's easier, the podcast version, because like everything else, you can listen, while you're working or whatever it is that you're doing versus the video option. Yeah, it's been busy out here. Everybody's asking me how my pigeons, I just got two new pigeon chicks born the other day. And I think I'm going to put those up for sale. So yeah, down the road. And I'm, like I said, I'm on a learning curve when it comes to racing pigeon world. That's how I feel. It's like, so yeah. And then hopefully I'm gonna getting some of them that I can enter into some 2025 races. Because believe it or not, there's like a whole timing thing, like when the chicks are hatched, and if you can, to enter them into a race. Because this is the thing people don't realize, and I didn't realize it until I got into this, that once you train a pigeon to home or race, go towards a certain destination, that's it. It's fixed in their brain. So you can't take that same pigeon and say, oh, I'm going to enter you now in another race. That's it. They're done. So your best hope is, if it's a good pigeon and the lineage is good, and especially if it places well, is that you use it for breeding and sell the chicks. Yeah. That kind of, but yeah. Like I said, I'm on a learning curve with that, which just takes up some of my time. And everybody asks me how the chickens are fine, and everybody's doing good. I'm waiting for a little bit of cool weather. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm waiting for a little bit of cool weather. I'm done with the hot weather. And then when it's cold, I'll be like, man, it's so cold. And let me see what else. Everything is good. Like I said, we're racing, believe it or not, or so it seems, towards 2025. Like I said, when you're a kid, you tell somebody it's a year, they'll be like, a year? A year? And now it's like, blink your eye and that's it. The year is come and gone, and here we are. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again because, like, to me, it seems like the other day we were coming up on Y2K, and I know there's people out there that were like, "Hey, I was born after 2000." Where Y2K was the big thing. The year 2000, 21st century. Wow. And now that's in the rearview mirror. Like, forget that. Nothing. And then what was it? We kind of had a little bit of that 2012 when they had the Mayan calendar. Nothing happened. A lot of hype, but and that's a whole nother show that we could do because I've heard of aspects of as far as the timing, was it really 2012 or the shifting, because a lot of these calendars were astronomical or astrological, more with astronomy as far as the calculations, and if the skies had changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's another show. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who I have as a guest today. And this is his first time here. His name is CJ Toca. He's an author, proud father, amateur sightseer, an Anglophile, a barrister, an occasional peruser of classic film, art, and literature. In his spare time, he's an Amazon best-selling author. I'm going to give you the titles of Vacant Seat, which transports the readers to Scotland, Italy, Russia, Spain, and Brazil in order to solve a spellbinding mystery. He enjoys writing suspense and mystery fiction, my favorite, with an eye towards spiritual or mystical aspects of life. And one of his titles, A Secret Heir, contains both those components, spiritual and mystical, and the prequel, The Vacant Seat, is a spiritual mystery, setting the stage for the adventures and relationships between the protagonists, Stefania, Thomas, Grishenko, and Anatoly, and others in The Secret Heir. And of course, in The Secret Heir, it relates to their past adventures and relationships and new ones to come. And I'm going to ask him, he has The Lost Painting coming out in 2023 or early 2024. I have to ask him if that's been out. And his settings are unique and not often used, such as rural and urban New Jersey, rural Scotland, Malta, the Cape Verde Islands, Brazil, Turkmenistan, rural Arizona, Mexico, and the vacancy transports the reader to Italy, but also again to rural Scotland or Brazil. All right. Basically, these are books with royal intrigue and conspiracy, reminiscent of the Davinci Code. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, CJ?
Good, great. Thank you, Marlene, for the introduction. Very much
On the
appreciated.
contrary, it's my pleasure. Let me ask you, what made you decide to become an author? Or is this something that you have been doing like in the background all your life?
Well, I've always wanted to be an author. I've always wanted to write fiction. Never really got the time. In my day job, I do a lot of nonfiction writing, and
Okay.
this is sort of a thing I do on weekends and the evenings. And I always had a lot of ideas, and
Okay.
I decided finally uh, to put pen to paper. I went to some programs and learned about um, nonfiction writing. Read a lot of fiction writing. Sorry, read a lot of fiction, so that I knew what I was doing, so to speak. Because, as
Okay.
I said, I did mostly nonfiction, and
Hmm.
um, and then I just started writing, and that's sort of how I became an author.
That's great. So that's how everybody, since I was a kid, I was like writing. But it's one thing, sometimes you have something that you like to do, and then what's that saying? Life gets in the way, and you end up not doing it, and then you take it up later on. But let me ask you, as far as fiction and nonfiction, I imagine what with obviously with it when it's fiction, you can let your imagination go where it wants to go, as far as the storyline.
Yes, that's absolutely 100% true. I mean, there's so many different genres of
Yeah.
fiction, and my books kind of fit into several genres. Mysteries, thriller, and suspense, spiritual mysteries,
Okay.
spiritual books. I mean, they're not super heavy on really anything. I think they're sort of mysteries with both a spiritual and a thriller type of bent to them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
and it depends on what you consider spiritual. So,
Sure.
the main character in all three books is a woman named Stefania, and the three books really are the development of her both spiritually and, if you would, metaphysically. She ultimately determines that she has a second sight. She has
Okay.
sixth sense, and the books follow her spiritual growth and this progression of hers.
Okay. Right. In other words, because I was going to ask you this, was it where you have, I don't want to use the word non-believer, but where you have a character or a person, that they, I don't want to say that they're non-believers as far as, you know, maybe even religious, but they're just not mystical. How's that? They're not spiritual. And it sounds almost like she went in that direction. I think a lot that happens to a lot of people in real life, by the way. As far as what was it that let me ask you this, I mean, I don't want you to give your storyline away, but what, how did she realize, or what was it about her, what incidents happened that made her think or come to the realization that she had some type of either clairvoyance or anything like that?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head in a sense. So when the book starts, when the Vacant seed starts, she's sort of an aspiritual person, at very best an atheist, maybe an agnostic, and she meets the other main character, Thomas, who is deeply religious, um, and through this trek that they end up on, they and he's a deep religious Catholic, which is his tradition. Um, they She's introduced to mystical Islam. There's a sheikh who's a Sufi mystic who provides clues in their trek. Um, I really kind of like that character so much. I brought him back in a later book. Um, and through this trek that they're on, she becomes more spiritual. She sees the spiritual side of things. She sort of grows into a spiritual person where she had never been a spiritual person before. And then she she's exposed to stories about miracles that Thomas shares with her. They go
Hmm.
to places where miracles have occurred,
Okay.
and then ultimately she starts having dreams that foretell the future,
Okay.
um, and she starts having her own sort of psychic awakening.
Okay. All right. So yeah, she's developing this, and how's this like untangling this, especially like if she's coming from the agnostic kind of mentality. How's that? Let me ask you, even though I know you're saying your main character there is female, did you ever go through something like this personally, as far as either mystical experience or having something that made you see something differently as far as the spiritual or mystical aspect of life?
Yes, I mean, I, I later in life I became more spiritual, and one of the I think themes throughout all three books is there are no such thing as coincidences, um, and I have had numerous experiences that make me a skeptic would say, well, they're just coincidences.
Yeah.
But, are they really coincidences when a minute or a second either way would completely upend the coincidence? So I suppose it's a coincidence that, an asteroid struck the Earth and destroyed the dinosaurs. But is it a coincidence when, other things happen in a city of 8 million people, and you meet someone who you would have never expected to meet, or
Right.
in a place you never would expect to see them. So I've experienced numerous, I would say, spiritual events. I mean, I have
Right.
had a number of family members pass, both myself and my wife, and sometimes you just feel that they're there, and they're kind of
Mm-hmm.
letting you know that they're there. And I, so that's the answer to your question. Um,
Right. Right. That the synchronicity of it. I mean, you could, and I think a lot of us do it sometimes when things like that happen. We kind of try to rationalize it, but then there's deep down inside you go, what are the odds on this? Come on. You know?
yeah, it's yeah, that's exactly. It's sort of like saying, okay, this happened, but what are the odds? And so when I did the second book, The Secret Heir, I interviewed a woman who is a I want to call her a psychic as so much as she well, I guess she would be uh, she would be considered a psychic, but she was came very highly recommended, and I had a great interview with her, and she gave me
Okay.
some very very interesting insights, and that made me think about things that have happened and how things happen, and the like,
Okay.
and you know, yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah, right. In other words, and this is the thing. And if you talk to psychics, some of them will tell you they all get, whether it's like you said, like let's say your protagonist, whether it comes through a dream or lucid dreaming or just a feeling, that feeling that you get like, don't go down that street today to go to work, that kind of deal. Or even, yeah, because you hear all the time about these people that they have that gut feeling, don't go there, don't go that way to work, or what, there's something, stuff that normally would not, how can I say, scare them. They think I'm not going to go to that place today because there's something wrong, and they try, some unfortunately don't listen to their gut instinct because they try to rationalize it, and they think that their imagination is running away with them. Come to find out, you'll hear some stories of people that will say, what, uncertain, this happened, and that day I decided I was going to stay home, or that day I was supposed to go into that whatever and I didn't, and it turned out somebody got mugged or somebody got hurt or there was an accident, all these things, and it's a one-time thing, and they can't explain it, but there it is. And then there's other people that, because I use that, I'm sure you've heard of people that, let's say they decide I'm not going to go on that plane trip because I have a really bad feeling. Okay, this, I'm talking about not a person that's afraid of flying. And I think most people, I'm saying, of all the people that get on a plane that maybe had a funny feeling and something does happen, they can't come back and tell you, oh, by the way, I had a bad dream about this, or I thought I shouldn't go, but I talked myself into it. Because that's it, they're gone. But I think that sometimes, yeah, we have a lot of those, whether you want to call them psychic or just flashes of insight that you just can't explain. And, there's something to it, like you said, the synchronicity of either to be or not to be at a certain place. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that makes life very interesting. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah, and I try to bring that sort of to life because I mean, you know, none of us live, for lack of a better word, plain vanilla lives. Even those who it would appear they do, and we all have challenges. So Stefania seemed to be living a more or less plain vanilla life. She gets a job she really doesn't like, but she bumps
Mm-hmm.
into Thomas, who basically is a change agent in her life, and it sends her down a pathway that she never
Okay.
anticipated. Um, and as the stories progress, she becomes more and more insightful. Um, and they and Thomas is the one who teaches her there's no such thing as coincidences.
Right.
And then she starts believing that there's no such things as coincidences. And sure enough, a lot of her insights are coming to pass. So
Right.
uh, trying to make her, I really like her character, although I've been told that the antagonist, Svetlana Grishenko, is a more interesting character. But
So in other words,
um,
your villain is stealing the show. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, uh, but yeah, that's what I've been told. It's like, you got to write a book on Svetlana Grishenko, so maybe I'll do a prequel.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, of course. And you know what? That's really sometimes it's that's great because that character is like the character that people want to know more about him. Like, yeah, he's well, even villains are interesting. If you make them all bad all the time, sometimes you need to throw in like what his motivations are. But that's great. I like to hear those stories about the and it's that thing that you were saying how your characters realizing that there's no coincidences like and I'll say sometimes a coincidence leads to something else like how's this that you how's this you do or let's say you take a job or something anything like that you really weren't like too like thrilled with and of course this only works in hindsight then you realize that because you let's say took that job I'm going to give that as an example you have the opportunity that you really wanted let's say in other words but then you look back and you realize you know what if I wouldn't have gone and done that first job or taken did whatever this would never have fallen in my lap it would never have come directly to me so sometimes how's this that sometimes coincidences they at first blush they don't appear like they're positive but they turn out to be down the road you might not get it though at the beginning yeah
oh, oh,
so
oh, yeah, yeah, no, I agree. You look back and you say, my God, if I hadn't
yes
done X, Y, and Z, I wouldn't literally be here today.
right
And and it could be um, anything between anything, but taking a different subway. If you had taken
mm-hmm
if the subway
yes
you usually take, you may not have met your partner.
yes
I mean, it
mm-hmm
could be a good thing as opposed to it could be,
sure
I did, I changed my flight and the person I sat next to, I fell in love with. And,
sure yeah like
or they,
this is not somebody you would normally have met
yeah,
you see what I'm saying that they don't even live around you or work with you like saying if I wouldn't have been there at this place at this time chances are I would never have crossed paths with this person ever
yeah. Um, yeah. And that's sort of what happens here. Um,
okay
Stefania never would have met Thomas. It was an incredibly serendipitous meeting, and their meeting was hardly hardly what I would call casual. They bumped into each other. All of her stuff fell over the place. She was very embarrassed and didn't even get his name. And I mean, this is the beginning of the book, so it's not really telling tales out of school. And then
mm-hmm
they meet again um, shortly thereafter, or they wouldn't have known each other had they not bumped into each other. And and that sort of sets the stage for their relationship, which is a complex one. Um,
okay
uh, it becomes a complex one, and it becomes even more complex as each of the books go forward. Um, but yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy. Is you have a situation where you never would have met this person, and that's what
Hmm.
I did here with
Yes.
Stefani and Thomas. He's a duke, by the way, a British duke. She never
Okay.
would have met him if she hadn't taken a job she didn't really, an assignment she really didn't want.
Okay.
Um, so yeah.
Right. In other words, they traveled in different circles.
Oh yeah, yeah. She's a half Brazilian, half Italian, um,
Hmm.
uh, trying to get her feet wet in the public as a a reporter, and he's a British duke with
It's like, yeah,
connections
it's
at the
like,
highest levels of society. But he also happens to be a rarity, which is a Catholic British duke, and he happens
right.
to be at the Vatican, and she is there doing research on her first assignment, which she detests and
Ah, there.
loathes.
See, yeah, it's that's what I'm saying is like, sometimes when you end up, what you don't like to do, later on you realize, oh, thank God, I did that, or because it's life is that way. Um, eh, the same thing, where let me ask you something. As far as right now, which how many books have you written in that one? Is it 3 books and one's pending, or two and one's pending?
Two and one's pending.
Okay.
The lost painting has been a work in progress. It
Mm-hmm.
has been um, it has been uh, tougher for me to write than the two first books, which I was able to get done pretty quickly, simply because I really wanted to make the lost painting well, maybe a little more complex, and
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to develop Stefania's um, abilities, and so it's taken me longer to write, but hopefully I'll have it out by the end of this year, if
Okay.
I'm lucky.
Let me ask you the settings, because it sounds like you this is international settings. Have you gone there, or are you doing research? Is that what takes time, or how does that work for you?
I have been to a lot of the locales
Okay.
in the books.
Okay.
I've been to the areas in Spain. I've been to the areas in um, Italy. I have been certainly been to the areas in New Jersey
Right.
uh,
Exactly.
that are in the book. So that are in the books. I'm trying to think. I have not been to Turkmenistan, and I have not been to the Cape Verde Islands. Although I would love.
Yeah, that's right off the coast of Africa, right? It was, I believe it was a Portuguese. I think they were there. The Portuguese had it for several years. There's a lot of, from what I understand, Portuguese. Um,
Actually, I'm pretty sure it's the Cape Verde Islands where I have them going. I have them going to the capital of the Cape Verde Islands. I think it is Portuguese. That's correct
hmm.
because Stefania speaks Portuguese,
Yes.
and
Yes.
yeah, yes, it was or is a either
That's what
Portuguese.
I'm saying. I'm almost positive they're not there, but they were there for like a couple of 100 years or more. As far as like where a lot of the from what I understand, the people that live there have even like the Portuguese names, surnames, that kind
Yes,
of deal. Right up. Yes.
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 And they when they go there, it, it's fortuitous that Stefania speaks Portuguese
Of
because
course. That always
that's.
helps.
But I wanted to bring the reader to some places that you don't often
Sure, of course.
see,
That's what people, at least me, that's what I like. Is like,
and so Cape Verde Island is one of them. Malta is another one. Although I haven't been to Malta. I'd like to get there myself. And
yes.
Turkmenistan is one. So yeah, I'm trying to get the readers to some of these places, and and I try to seek out some of the more spiritual locations, some of these places. So in Malta,
Okay.
um,
The Knights of Malta.
um, they go to a very old church that's not very well known
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know anything about Malta. Um, and a scene in the book takes place. It's called the I think it's called the Rotunda of Mosta, and
Okay.
it's a church modeled after the Pantheon in Rome.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
so anyway, so that's the sort of the idea, is to try to transport the region. Now I've been criticized for that. Somebody said, "Is your next book, or is everybody going to be in one place for a change?" So, but
But you
um,
know what? I'm gonna tell you something. I think of it as far as, suspense. I think this is just me opining. When you find yourself in a strange place where you're not native to, I mean, I think it happens in real life, and you don't know maybe the whether the laws, or you're like in a place where everything is different, from where you're at, and you have to figure things out, and you don't know really who's friendly or not, and you might not even know the language. That kind of adds an edge of suspense to it, as far as to bring you outside of, let's say, if you live in the United States, if it's placed in the United States where, yeah, things are different, but overall it's kind of the same status quo, as far as, you'll find a McDonald's everywhere you go or something like that, where you go to a place where the customs are different, the people are different. I don't know. I think that that's great, because personally for me that would make me like worried. But yeah,
yeah,
as far as
one of my well, two of my favorite scenes in um, the the Secret Heir are the one in Turkmenistan and the
mm-hmm.
other in the Cape Verde Islands. I like those scenes very much. I like to read those scenes, and then of course one of my favorite scenes is the scene in the vacant seat, which is very early on in the book in Scotland, on an island called Seal Island off the
Okay.
coast of Scotland. Um, I don't want to give
All
anything
right, right. Well, I'm gonna
terribly.
I'm gonna ask you a generic question because I don't want you. What's driving them? Is it his quest or her quest? How's that?
Well, in the first book, it's a joint sort of a. They're both kind of joint quests.
Okay.
So in the first book, she discovers something that she doesn't really know precisely what it is, because
Right.
she finds it in the Vatican archives. And
Okay.
Thomas, being not only being a Catholic, but being a relatively religious one and well connected,
Mm-hmm.
is able to guide her along and
Okay.
introduce her to things that she wouldn't ordinarily be, and inform her about things she ordinarily wouldn't know about,
Okay.
um, and including Thomas's aunt, who was a nun who had worked at the Vatican, which is a very important part of the story. It's one of my favorite scenes in the book.
Okay.
So it's the vacancy is really a joint quest, because it starts out as a project that Stefania's working as a journalist. The
Okay.
secret,
And that's why I was wondering, was her and he was like coming along and helping her out, or was
yeah,
it she just, was it his and she just decided to tag along because, she's, maybe it involved her research.
yes,
Um,
yeah, it
and are
involves.
they are they are they personality wise? Are they opposites? And there's something that makes them want to work with each other, or how do they relate to each other?
And you'll, I think, find this in all three books, is that Stefania's character grows. So initially, um, she is uh, I don't want to say enamored with Thomas. Initially, they do not get on very well.
Okay.
They don't get along. He doesn't like her because she's critical of his religious beliefs.
Okay.
She thinks he's stuffy, and and arrogant. And then the more time they spend with one another, the more they become to enjoy each other's company. And she gets she busts his chops sometimes, and he busts her chops sometimes, and ultimately they have there is a sort of a meeting of the minds in the sense that or their differences kind of go away, and they become one in the sense that they're looking to solve this problem. But as is the case with a lot of things, when you find out what the answer is, it may not be an answer you like, and it's not an answer one of them likes.
Let me ask you: is a villain wanting the same thing as them, or hiding it, or what motivates your villain, kind of, without letting out everything? What makes him a villain? How's that?
The villain is Svetlana Grushenko. She is the deputy director of the Russian SVR, which is the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, which is the successor to the KGB. Okay. And she has her own agenda. And it's her agenda. Her agenda is to basically stop Stefania's story from ever seeing the light of the day. Her project, and I think I like the way I ended the book, the first book. I think I don't want to say it's creative, but it's not. It's not. She shows up and puts 2 bullets in Stefania's brain, and that's the end of the story. But that's not what happens. It's a very creative end, and it causes consternation all the way around. With the exception of Svetlana gets what she wants, but it's I think it's a creative ending. And it leads well into the next book, where again Stefania's the unbeknownst recipient of interesting information that she enlists Thomas's help, and he's more than happy to help her again because it suits his personal interests, which is the same thing that happened in the first book. It suited his personal interests. Now in the third book, Thomas reaches out for her because he needs.
So let me ask you: does Thomas have a secret agenda somewhere in the background for himself that he hasn't told her about?
Yeah, in the first book, yes.
Okay.
But she eventually, she knows it eventually. But yes, he has a secretive agenda because they didn't like each other, and he was going along for the ride because he needed to see it through. And ultimately, she realizes what his agenda is, and unfortunately, at the end, the question is going to be whose agenda wins out. Is it Stefania's agenda, or is it Thomas's agenda, or is it Svetlana Grushenko's agenda? And for the most of the book, we just call her Grushenko because her name, Svetlana, is so similar to Stefania. But
let me ask you, and the reason why I asked you about your villain, what motivated him, because you have villains that sometimes they're just mean, they're psychopaths, they're just bad, whatever. That's their driving force. They're control freaks and they're psychopaths. And then you have other villains who are just it's maybe they're a little bit sociopathic, but more than anything, they're driven by something that they think is what is important to them. In other words, they're they're totally dedicated to either a person or an ideal or a mission or whatever, that they'll do whatever it takes. And that's why I asked you about your villain. Is she just a mean villain, or does she have her own history as to why she does what she does?
She is devoted to the Russian Federation.
Okay.
So she has been brought up through the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have, well, she has significant others, but
Right.
all of them are not loyal to her necessarily. She
Okay.
is suspicious of a lot of people, but her loyalty lies with Russia. So what she's
Okay.
doing is for Russia.
Exactly.
So
Okay.
she's not necessarily mean for the sake of being mean, but
Right.
she's certainly more ruthless in the second book. But and maybe in the third book, Stefania gets her revenge. We'll see.
Right. Because you always think of, there's villains that they'll do horrible things. They don't need to justify it. They're just whatever. And then there's others that they do something which is maybe horrible, but they kind of justify it in their own warped way in their mind. Like, this is what I'll do whatever it takes. The ends justify the mean kind of, mentality. So yeah, that's why I asked about that. The and As far as characters, are you going to bring anybody new in?
Yeah, yes. So the in the first book in the vacancy, there is a brief um, description of Anatoly, who is Svetlana Grishenko's assistant. He has a much bigger role in the Secret Heir. Okay, um, and in um, and in the Lost Painting,
Okay.
I am bringing in what I would consider two characters I really, really like.
Okay.
Um, um, and there's a reprise of the Sufi Sheikh who was in
Okay.
the vacant seat again in the Lost Painting. He comes back with another prophecy that he gives to Stefania. But in the Lost Painting, I develop three characters actually
Okay.
who are new, who I really like. A lot of the um, Lost Painting takes place this time in Italy, although parts of it in England and France and Brazil. And I wanted to weave in the vortices in Sedona, Arizona into the story.
Okay.
So they go to Sedona for a reason, and uh, Stefania is at one of the vortices, and a she receives a vision.
Ah, okay.
I
While
don't
she's
know.
awake.
She gets into these states of semi consciousness,
Okay.
usually in spiritual places. Sometimes when she's sleeping or
Mm-hmm.
drowsy, and um, so she goes to Sedona, and one of the places they visit, there is a church in Sedona that's at one of the vortices, and they're visiting this church, and she has a vision. So it was a little bit far afield.
Mm-hmm.
I did have them in Arizona in the Secret Air. They spent a lot of time there, but
Okay.
I I recently was at Sedona, and really liked the concept of the vortices of Sedona and this concept that there is this this energy field there, and I wanted to
Yes.
work that into the story.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of yeah. Sedona has quite a well, there's a lot of energy because there's just a lot of people out there as far as that are in the mystical or spiritual type of lifestyle that live out there, if not in Sedona proper, around Sedona. I mean, there's a lot of energy out there, and so sometimes I've had a couple of people that have gone out there and they've been overcome with with the feelings out there. Too much so, in other words, I had to like leave kind of deal. But and so let me ask you: have you ever thought how far you're going to take your characters, or not yet?
I'd like to take them as far as I can.
Okay.
There is hints at the end of the Secret Heir. Stefania has two. She has a dream within a dream,
Okay.
and one of the events in the dream has already come true. In the it's come true in the Lost Painting.
Okay.
And then we'll have to wait and see if the other one comes true. But yeah, I really would like to take these characters as far as I can take them, including some of the newer characters in the Lost Painting, who I really kind of like, that I've developed. So,
Right.
if it leads to a fourth book, like I said, I've been encouraged to do a prequel because people like
Mm-hmm.
the Svetlana Grushenko character. Um, so we'll see. But yeah, I
Right.
would
And
love.
and I want to say that, the characters, for lack of a better word, they take on a life of their own. And it's like you don't, it's like further adventures of dot dot dot. As far as all right, you guys, calm down. As oh, yes, be quiet, real quick. Yeah, CJ. My audience knows this is my enforcer. It's full of water, and when my little dogs, for no reason, none whatsoever, decide they're one's gonna bark, and then of course the rest follow, I use the enforcer on them. Shush. That's
Well,
you.
you may appreciate this. So I I don't know. I mean, I certainly you read fiction and there are animals in fiction. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but I like having people have pets.
Yes.
So Thomas has a pet dog, and Svetlana Grushenko is a cat person. So she's got a
Okay.
cat. Um, and the dog, Thomas's dog, really likes Stefania. And the dog makes a reprieve in, he comes back in the Lost Painting. So I like including, uh, I mean, most people, I don't know most people, but a lot of people have pets. I have a dog, and we used to have cats, and uh, I think
Believe
it
me, you're
makes,
talking to an animal person. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I
yeah,
know what you mean. I know what you mean.
yeah. So
They that's like, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you this is a very old series. I want to say it came out in the 40s, that it was with Powell, that was the Thin Man series, and they had the dog that was like their they would do the detective work with them. This is an old series. They maybe made like 4 or 5 films, but I remember the dog was part of. The dog in and of itself became famous because this was their dog that they would take with them when they were sleuthing. And you always like that. I personally do because I'm an animal person. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
yeah, that's another dimension to, and a realistic dimension to the persons. I mean,
Yes.
the dogs don't have a significant role, although one of the quote unquote, a very small role, but a bad person in the Secret Heir has a dog, and people have, everybody has dogs, everybody's got cats. It's
Yes.
a great
Yes.
thing, and
No, I mean, let's face it. Nowadays, people are going to do shopping with their dogs, and I'm not talking about service animals, okay? You see people with little blankets and their little dogs. Usually, I've seen that they're older dog. Or once in a while, this has happened to me. They're rolling a stroller along, and I'm like, the baby. No, that's not a baby. That's a dog. So I believe me, I understand this thing, more than ever, where people, that their animals, they're so close to them that they Take them everywhere. And by this, I don't mean like, because I know there's the service dogs and the therapy dogs. I'm just saying people take their little dogs with them. Like, let's go shopping. So, yes, I know exactly what you mean. As far as that adds a dimension that I think a lot of people, and as a matter of fact, that thing that you said about the bad guy, there was, I was writing an article not too long ago. This was an article on an old murder happened. But anyway, part of what was covered about this man that turned out he was a murderer was that he was really kind to his animals. And apparently there was a list of murderers or people that were known that even though they had killed human beings, they were really good to their pets. And I was like, wow, that's comforting, I guess. Right? Okay, I have no mercy for the human, but I'm really good with my dog. And
Yeah.
they even published it as part of his story while he was at trial, was that he was very kind to his dog. Even though he was accused, he was standing trial for having killed his young mistress, and then other people along the way, you find out that this guy was like a real piece of work. And it's like almost that thing where, there's maybe a little bit of your soul that can be salvaged because you're actually kind to animals. I mean, I guess that's the way
Yeah.
most people, maybe some people look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you're not all bad.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're not all bad, but I mean, Svetlana Groshenko, the character, I mean, she loves her cat, um,
Hmm.
and, but she's she's I'm trying to really it's hard way to describe her. She's a very intense person, but it's her and a narcissistic, I guess, is the best way to describe her.
Okay.
But she does love her cat.
Yes. Yes, there's people like that. I've met them in real life. Yes, I've met people like that. They're very much into themselves, but they have this little sliver of not them where they're they care about their, because usually the hallmarks of a narcissist is whoever or whatever is in their orbit, it serves them somehow. You know,
Right.
their friends serve them. Whoever there is like, and if you're never useful, it's like bye, see ya. Um, but yeah, I have come across people like that are very intense and very narcissistic and self-centered, but they have this little part of them that is not that way. Very very unusual. If you want to go into the psychology of it, as far as, but again, it makes for a very interesting villain. It makes for a very interesting villain.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I
Because you're always wondering is there anything else that this person, how bad is this person? Or is there like is there something, that some time will disable the evilness in them? Something like that along those lines. Um, do you think that, how's this? Because I don't even know if you've even thought about it. Let me ask you, when you write your books, when you start at the beginning, do you already know what the end is, or do you work it backwards? Or does that come as a surprise as you're working on the book?
Most people who listen to my answer are going to say, this guy's crazy. So I sort of do sort of a blitzkrieg style writing.
Okay.
So I
Uh-huh.
sort of have an idea in my mind
All right.
what the story is, and I start writing and I let it take me where it takes me. And for the vacant seat, I think I had three endings, and I ultimately picked one. For the secret heir, I also had a few endings, and I ultimately picked one. And for
Okay.
the lost painting, I literally figured out the ending this week when I was walking my dog.
Okay. All right. Okay. In other words, this is going somewhere. I just don't know exactly where.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I said to myself, well, this is where we are. What are the possibilities and the facts that we know them in the book?
Okay.
And I was like walking my dog, and I'm like, okay, we got to do that. We got to do that.
Eureka.
And that's the answer. So, yeah. So I just kind of go and see where it takes me. And then I've had, like I said, I've had issues with the endings, and I've revised the endings on the previous two books several times. But
Okay.
I think I basically just like a river. I go where it flows.
Right,
And
right.
where it takes me.
Uh-huh.
And I like the ending in the vacant seat very much. I think the
Okay.
ending in the secret air is a bit controversial,
Okay.
but um, I liked it too, and I think I'm going to really like the ending in the lost painting. I just hope that it's believable because I like, although um, although I do have um, this psychic element to
Mm-hmm.
and mystical element to the books, I like them to be as realistic as possible. So I don't like to see, you're not going to see people get shot 6 times, get up and,
Right. Yeah.
walk
It's
away.
like
Uh,
right, right, right. Yeah, I
um,
see what you mean.
I want everything to be believable. So I'm hoping the ending to the lost painting is going to be believable because nothing I hate more than either reading a book or watching a movie and say,
Yes.
no, there's a huge hole in this plot. Um,
Right. It's like that's not, man, that's not even close to being realistic.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
it's let me tell you the it's like, you grow these characters as along the way, and and again, I'm glad you point that out because sometimes you read stories where you have this character and this is the what they and all of a sudden they become another person, like their motivation almost changes. They're like, what are you doing? That's not what happened to this character? They kind of like twist especially in the ending, and they make
yeah.
the character do something so out of character that you're like, that doesn't make sense. Why?
Yeah, and I've tried to be subtle about it. Like with Stefania's personality does change, but
Right.
it's subtle. I mean, she started out being like a deer in the headlights novice journalist,
Right.
and she went through this the vacancy, and then she went through everything that happened in the secret air, and now she's
Mm-hmm.
pretty tough chica.
Right.
She's
She's learning along the way.
yeah, yeah.
Are you using any of the symbology, like stuff like that? Because I know there was a reference to it in the bio, like to the Davinci Code, where there's, and I imagine maybe what they're doing is that part of also of their quest as far as the mystery of it.
There is some symbolism in the books.
Mm-hmm.
The um, the for example, the I'm trying to think. Well, first of all, the vacant seat involves a lot of prophecies. So
Okay.
there are a number of prophecies, and as I said, there the initial book is more of a Dan Brown type of book. So you have the uh, issues regarding the prophecies of Fatima, you have discussions of regarding Nostradamus.
Okay.
Um, uh, but there is some symbolism. The in the Secret Air, for example, um, there I'm trying to think of which one it is. The dates are symbolic,
Okay.
and I get the books confused sometimes. Um, Certainly, in the third book, there is a significant amount of symbolism, but
Okay.
I have to apologize. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I did throughout the books. I've There were symbolic things that if you thought about them, you'd catch them. Um,
Right. Okay.
okay, here's one. I got it. Okay, here's one. So Stefania DiMaggio's name is symbolic. Okay,
Okay.
and um, I'll I can tell you why.
All
So
right.
her first name is Stefania, which is the female of Stephen, who is the
Mm-hmm.
first martyr of in the Catholic faith anyway, or in the Christian faith. DiMaggio means of May, which is the month of Mary. And the first book, The Vacant Seat, involves um, the involves the a number of um, miracles attributed to the Virgin Mary and the
Okay.
Fatima prophecies, which are also regarding the Virgin Mary. Nostradamus means our mother, our lady in um, in Latin. Um,
Okay.
one of the priest in the Vacant Seats, last name is Lacroix, which translated is the cross.
Yes.
Um, Thomas is Thomas, but you find out that he's named after St. Thomas More and St. Thomas Becket, who were
Mm-hmm.
both martyrs who died for
Okay.
their faith in England. So I tried to wrap in a lot of um, a lot of that type of symbolism in the book. Uh, you kind of have to look for it. If I
Okay.
didn't just
Yeah, that's
tell you, I think people would probably not have uh, not have figured it out. Um, but those are those are some of the um, symbolism in this book. In the last book, um, there are the Lost Painting. Some of the characters are from India, and
okay.
they're from Goa, which was
Yes.
a Portuguese
Yes,
colony.
that's right. That island. They were there so since the 1500s.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
the names are Portuguese Indian names,
Mm-hmm.
but an astute reader will figure out what the names translated mean and they're
Okay.
symbolic,
Yes.
um, given who the characters are.
Yeah.
So
That's why you
uh,
have people don't realize there's certain. That's why you will have meet people from India that have Portuguese names. People say, "Well, how did that happen?" Is because of the Portuguese that were out there in those islands and off the coast of India.
yes,
That at that time, I believe they were the Catholics and they were battling. The religions. There was a big with the English because the religious battle between Protestantism and Catholicism was a big deal. So yeah, that's very
yeah,
very interesting.
and that actually plays into some of the aspects of the vacant seat because
Really?
Thomas's
Okay.
grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
who Elizabeth, is still fighting. You'll find when you're reading it is still fighting the Reformation, still fighting the Reformation.
Are
She's
you kidding? Wow, that's
and
interesting.
and whereas her whereas Thomas's uh, aunt, who was a nun, is much
Mm-hmm.
more um, forgiving and much more progressive, but his grandmother is still fighting the Reformation 500 years on, and it's
Right.
in which makes her another sort of interesting character. Um, I don't want to give too much away, but
Right. 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 But in other words, there's a history that goes back as far as the family's concerned as to maybe what motivates them or stuff like that. That's very interesting. I really like that. I really
yeah,
like
certainly
that.
what motivates her and Thomas and the pressure she puts on Thomas. So
Okay.
there's an inter-family dynamic that comes to play. Um, and, you know, she's not a saint, that's for sure.
Oh no, that's saint. Saints are boring. Oh, but you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like,
Yeah, yes, yeah,
so
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, CJ, it has been wonderful to speak to you. I really, really enjoy this. For my podcast listeners, where can they find you at? And I'm going to have a link in the credits of the show, but for the podcast listeners.
www.cjtoca.com.
Okay. They can find there what your books, and
My books,
also when you come out with this latest book,
the
you'll they can find it there.
the books can be found on the website, but they're on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
They are on Barnes and Noble online. The Vacant Seat is on Audible.
Okay.
The both books have been translated into Spanish and are available in Spanish. The
Wow, that's great.
the Vacant Seat is Asantio Vacante, and the
Mm-hmm.
vacant seat is El Herrero Secreto.
And Heredero
Um,
Secreto, yes.
yes. Sorry if my
That's great. That is fantastic. That's it. Spanish and English, man. You're good. That's
yeah.
about what that leaves. That yeah, yeah. I'm sure you've got some pockets of the world, but that mostly covers everything everywhere.
Yeah, hopefully. But
Yes,
yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that we have some Spanish speaking readers out there will be interested.
absolutely, absolutely. Again, thank you, CJ. It has been wonderful, and I want to wish you the best of luck in all your projects.
Thank you very much, Marlene. It was great to chat with you this evening.
Likewise. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. That's so interesting. I love to this. Somebody that writes, and I didn't even want to go there because I imagine like that he's into nonfiction. In other words, you got to stick to the facts when you're relating stuff that's nonfiction. So that's why I said, well, when you go fiction, you can like, all right, it's like let's go. By the way, I want to make a real quick note. This thing about how the Portuguese, and by the way, Columbus, the their whole intent of how this whole thing of the exploration came about was that the Silk Road, which had been there for hundreds of years, which is the desert, how you would get to the east to the Asia for spices, which was you even remember Marco Polo, and which by the way, when these merchants would go, they would be gone years because it was overland. And around this time, this is, in other words, this is besides of what was happening as far as the schism, Protestantism and Catholicism and the Reformation, all that stuff. The Ottoman Empire had control of the Silk Road, and they were charging exorbitant amounts of money. In other words, to go through the Spice Road and then the Silk Road. In other words, it was like the toll collector, like wow. And the idea was all these European countries, Portugal, Spain, England, all of them, was to find a route to the Far East so that they would not have to go overland. This is the whole idea for them. Columbus ended up ran into the Americas, but Portugal ended up going over there, and they were doing, that's why they were there several, 300 or 400 years before finally Goa was one of the islands that they were at. And this was all built. In other words, the motivator for this exploration was merchants, the spice. And then, of course, at that point, then the Portuguese would send back these. They even had a shipyard out there where they would build these huge ships, galleons or whatever. No, they were called the caracas or something like that, carracks, which they would load up and they would fill them up and they would trade them. They would send them like once a year back over to Portugal, unload their cargo. In other words, trade. This was very lucrative for them. But even then, besides the merchant aspect, as in money, there was a lot of clash, let's say, with the English and the Portuguese because of the religion thing. This was like a big deal. This was not like you got your religion and I got mine. No, nope, didn't work that way. So yeah, It's a lot of that sounds like, let me tell you, that background to his story sounds very, very interesting. Very interesting. As far as the backdrop for it. Um, and I like, depending also on the genre, like he said, but reading books that, how's this? They teach you, or you learn things that, man, I didn't know that. Things like that. That's why I also asked him about the symbols. And the reason why I asked that is that, everybody thinks of symbology as in, well, because of secret societies and secret, and in some cases, let's say, if you were, that's why let's say all the early paintings by all these masters of the Renaissance and even earlier, they only had religious figures or religious scenes. All right. Then when they got a little bit further up, it was like you could have a patron who, would paint himself and his wife and his kids, or later on, like, oh, the bowl of fruit in the table kind of deal. Think of the girl with a pearl earring. But it was still very, if you read about these paintings, there was symbolism incorporated into the painting, as into what they were wearing, what they were holding, what they were doing, maybe even that fruit bowl. In other words, there's a meaning in the painting, all right? And sometimes it wasn't in anything bad, but anyway. But you have to also understand that, especially during these times, most of the populace was uneducated. They were illiterate. And sometimes a symbol was the best you were going to get for people to understand what it's a certain thing or a certain place, what it was, because people understood a symbol. Well, that's why, it didn't always have to be like what's what I'm thinking about, like oh, this is a secret whatever, and then we're gonna put this weird symbol here. And no, sometimes it was just, you wanted to make sure people understood, hey, we got the what, that hammer means, or the thing is a blacksmith, because of course the high levels of illiteracy, you only had. And by the way, a lot of people think that if you were well off, you were literate, you'd be surprised. There was a lot of, that's usually the religious, like the monks. They're the ones that were more literate and could write and of course read. That's obviously, if you had to have some type of money so that you could, your parents would provide a tutor. But there were still a lot of the other ones running around where they weren't that, it wasn't a guarantee, how's that you were wealthy and you were that literate. All right. And then little by little, especially with a printing press, this is when your masses started to get more literate, because people were able to read more, things of that nature. And I think that's why also, when you hear about, like, during Shakespearean times, even back then, or the plays, this was like the stories. How's this? Listening to stories, you couldn't read it, but you would see it. All right, once you got to read it, then your imagination takes off from there, and you make up the story as you go along, which of course we're still doing even after. And one of the things also that I asked him about, and I find that as we get more technologically advanced, where, I don't know, you read all these, no, not read, I'm sorry, you watch all these shows where, whether it's police or something else, or a secret agent, they've got somebody up there in the computer room or in the headquarters, and they just, hey, yeah, no, go take a left at the next street, that kind of deal. In other words, that risk of not having the answer right on your fingertips is not there, because all you have to do is call your super duper genius computer hacker person and say, hey, I'm stuck in this place and I can't get out. How do I get out? Okay, go down the air duct and then the air duct will take you. There's a bend, and that'll put you in the alley. All right, that's great. Hello, and I think honestly, it's like I prefer to have the situations where you have to figure this out. Like, what do I do? I could go down that tunnel or I could go down that thing, but I don't know where that's going to take me. Might be a dead end or who knows? What's the lady or the tiger kind of deal? I don't know. And and one thing that he was saying about the realism the other day, I said, you know what? I'm going to have a retro moment here. I'm going to have a retro moment and I'm going to look at an old, I don't know, everybody, Hawaii Five-0, the old original one. The old original one came out in 69, I believe it was. That was the first season. I think it ran for 7 or 8 years. But anyway, I said, I'm going to binge on this. What the heck? I'm going to go see Jack Lord and that great theme song. And and of course, remember, these were the seasons when you had, I think it was like 20 episodes in a season. Not like now you have 6 and that's it. See you next year. So anyway, I'm watching these. And like in the first season, Jack Lord's McGarrett gets shot. And the other one gets... And it's really weird because, obviously the drama, you have one of your main character gets shot. He gets shot 3 times. There's one where he gets shot in the gut and then in the arm or, like the other 2 are not in his torso. But and then, of course, but everybody ends up getting shot. And the thing is, you see these people bounce back and act like getting shot is okay. And another character also gets shot. Danny, Bookham Dano. A bunch of people get shot in the next episode. They never tell you, okay, 3 weeks later or 3 months later, the next episode just, they lands you in whatever's going on. But I guess they never show that character in recovery. Like, yeah, I'm back at work, but man, I gotta take it easier. Like, hey, I still got my arm in a cast or a thing or whatever. They're like superhuman. They bounce around. Horrible things happen. And I mean, like, as far as a physical, like getting shot or beat up very badly. And they're like, okay, good as gold. And it's like, okay, this is being very unrealistic, man. Let me tell you something. I catch my finger and it's hurting for 3 weeks. My point being I guess that's one of it. I love it. I love looking at these old retro shows because, and believe it or not, the storylines are pretty good. They're pretty original. Because let me tell you something. I've gone back to watch some other shows, and I was like, man, this is very, very formulaic. And when they were out, I really liked it, but then after a while it gets old. And yep. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can show you this. I did a whole page. Hold on. Let me see if I can get it over here. Work. Why do I always have a problem with this? But then, and what is this? Let me see. I guess. Let me tell you something. And oh, nope, not that either. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about that. No, wait a minute. I know how I want to do this. Hold on. Hold that thought. It just takes me a while, but I don't catch on eventually. Sometimes I have to like... Here we go. Okay, here we go. And this is my part of on the... If you go to Miami Ghost Chronicles or any of the ones, you go to the Paranormal Podcast tab, okay, which is that one right there. And I have a little retro thing to the X-Files and to Art Bell, and because I don't know, I just love that. As a matter of fact, I have here, if you want to listen to Art Bell's bumper music, I have a whole playlist there, and these are even links to some of his older shows, the Ghost to Ghost, the Midnight in the Desert, and all that stuff, and of course the X-Files, things like that. So if you want to check it out, all right, you can go there and check it out. Hold on. Hey, here we go. I'm back. So yeah, in other words, retro is good. I like retro. Some of the stuff, when you look at it now, you're like, all right, boring. And it's like, man, I've been spoiled. But then other stuff is really, really good. And sometimes it's, what's the word I'm looking for? No agenda. It was just, hey, give me like that, like Hawaii Five-0 police procedural, you know, state police busting the bad guys. Make it simple. What is that kiss? Keep it simple, stupid. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show. Please come back. I have a lot of good guests coming on. All right, lined up. And again, please don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. Wherever you find me, make sure to subscribe so you get notification for when it's a new show, a video, or a podcast. Besides the video version of it, you're going to find me on Cloud Hub, on Rumble, on BitChute, on Steemit, on YouTube. And there's always a podcast version of that video. There's 2 versions. And of course, if you go to my website, Miami Ghost Chronicles, mpellicer.com, whichever the case is, you're going to find links to everything there. And again, if you look at it there versus at a podcast platform, you can listen to it without commercial interruption. All right. So till next time, take care. And thank you again for spending this time with me.